And one of the biggest issues in this campaign is right to work. Because here's what's amazing. And let me bring in Mark Mix, who is the president of the Right to Work Foundation and the Right to Work Committee. Mark, thanks for joining us.
John, good to be on with you, and thanks for that bumper music, Johnny Cash. Hear that train a coming, and it's coming in Virginia in just about a month, and there's very important issues on the table, as you stated, for sure.
Well, you definitely figured out why we played that song, because there's a big old freight train. I see a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's a big old freight train coming at me, and her name is Abigail Spanberger. Her campaign is such a fraud. And let me just lay this out. And I get your comments. So let's go to Right to Work, of which you're the president of it. So obviously we're going to talk about it today. But number one, she votes to eliminate right to work at the federal level in all states. Not once, not twice. She votes against it 4 times. Then she says, well, I'm probably going to vote against it in Virginia, but I'll probably get rid of it, but I'll probably be open to discussion. What the hell does that mean? You voted against it 4 times to eliminate it nationwide, so you're full of crap. Then she says, oh, I'm going to get your jobs back. All these federal jobs are gone. Yeah. Well, how are you going to get your jobs back? Are you just going to hire them all at the state level? Well, you don't have the budget for that. So how are you going to get them back? Well, you can only get them back if you create jobs in Virginia. And she wants to kill job creators by eliminating right to work in Virginia, which for years has been the cornerstone, the linchpin, the baseline of small businesses and businesses coming into Virginia to create jobs. So the hypocrisy here, Mark, is beyond the pale.
Yeah, indeed, John. It's real simple. She says, well, you're right. She voted twice, 3 times, 4 times, co-sponsored bills to repeal Virginia's right to work law and the 25 other right to work laws in the country. So the question about right to work is binary, John. Either I can force you to pay me to work or I can't. And that's what the right to work law says. It says you can join a union, you can participate if you want, but you can't lose your job if you don't pay union dues or fees. And Abigail Spanberger seems to think there's some space in between the payment of some money and the payment of no money when it comes to her position on right to work, because she knows right to work is popular. In polling at the state level, literally almost 9 out of 10 households in Virginia say we should protect Virginia's right to work law. And John, to your point, when it comes to economic development, right to work states across the country have 5 times the private sector job growth and 10 times more manufacturing job growth than states that allow forced unionism. So it's about individual freedom and it's about economic opportunity. And yet Spanberger can't figure out the equation that helps to make Virginia and keep Virginia strong and keep individual rights protected here.
So I just don't get it. You say you want to help people that have been displaced because of the downsizing of the federal government and loss of jobs in Virginia. Well, how do you do that? By eliminating the one thing that is the magnet to bring jobs to Virginia. How do you do that? How do you?
Yeah, well, I guess you could increase taxes, spend more money, fund these boondoggles that many states try to get involved in on the economic development front and say, hey, we'll give you these tax breaks or we'll give you this incentive money to come. But we know from site selection experts that literally 75% of people looking to expand, invest, and grow jobs in a state look at right to work as a primary kick out of that decision-making process. So immediately between half and 3/4 of the businesses and investors that would be looking at Virginia as a possible site selection, they would say, no, we're not going to go there because you don't have a right to work law. So it doesn't make any sense. And then, John, to add insult to injury, when we talk about public sector unionization, Abigail Spanberger believes it should be mandatory that every locality, every county negotiate with unions over, the employment of government officials. We know in states like California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, that model has failed. In fact, it failed so much that the first state that imposed union bargaining on government employees at the state level, Wisconsin, had to repeal it back in 2010, 2011 with Scott Walker. Right now, the calculations have saved taxpayers over $30 billion by just basically saying, we're going to run our government employment. We're not going to let union officials do that.
Well, the idea, look, and I always say this when I talk about right to work, Mark, and you know this. I mean, I grew up in a union household.
Yep.
My father was a pressman in New York City. He was at the Pressman's Local, whatever it was. He worked for a bunch of papers, Daily News, New York Times, Herald Tribune before we went out of business. That's where he started. And my father bled the union, right? He participated in the strikes. You know, when the scabs came in, they turned over the trucks. I mean, the guy was a union leader, right? And when he died, and I've told the story 100 times, one of the things he wanted, bury him in a suit. He had one suit, wanted to get buried in that, and he wanted his union card sticking out of his breast pocket. The guy bled the union, but it was his choice. It was his choice. He wasn't forced to join it. It was his choice. And so they would recruit the new workers to go into the union in the early days. And the whole idea that to get or keep your job, you have to pay union dues in an organization you might not want to join, and they just confiscate it out of your check.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, that's how it works in states that don't have right to work laws, John. It simply is a matter of, it's a mandatory subject of bargaining in a union environment. And you have to, the idea of union security is something that you have to negotiate over. And the first thing that an employer will say, well, look, okay, their demand is you got to make everyone pay union dues. Union boss says you got to make everyone pay union dues, or you got to give me a 25% pay increase for every worker. The first contract always gets union security. And that's exactly what it is. It's security for the union, because they get to take the money right out of a worker's paycheck before they see it, and it's a condition of them keeping their job. You know, my stepfather was a 32-year member of the Machinists Union. He was a welder. Same story, John, but he didn't believe in force and compulsion. He really didn't. He believed in his union because they were focused on the shop floor, because they were focused on the job, not on politics, not on the radical agenda that Abigail Spanberger is supporting, with union boss money supporting those agendas that have nothing to do with the workplace. Nothing.
I mean, it's a political agenda, Mark. That's what it's become. When our fathers were in the union, you're right. It was about the shop floor. It was about protecting, you know, their hours and overtime, and making sure they were treated fairly. And then if, you know, something went down, they had extra health care coverage. If there was a strike, there was a strike fund, you know, to help them get it through it, things of that nature. But all that's changed now. The whole unionization, the forced unionization, is a radical political agenda that you might not want to participate in, but you're made to do it anyway, and they take your money.
Yeah. Indeed. And they are big political players, John. As you mentioned in the introduction, they're injecting big money into the political system in these elections, the House of Delegates elections in Virginia. We can't forget about those either. But the governor's race has got just an absolute pure contrast between individual freedom in the workplace versus forced unionism. And it couldn't be starker. And Winsome Sears has stood up and said she'll support right to work. Abigail Spanberger is trying to hedge on that. But as you pointed out, John, her record is clear. She believes in forced unionism, not only in Virginia, but for the rest of the country.
Well, she voted in favor of it a number of times. I mean, I don't know how you say, oh, I voted in favor of it, but I didn't mean it. Like, yeah. You know, I was before. And when asked the question in Virginia, Spanberger, I mean, she never rejected it. She said, well, I'm going to take a look at it, but basically I'm in favor of joining a union. What are you going to take a look at it? She never took up his, she never said, you know, Sears was clear. I will continue right to work. 85, what is it? Almost 90% of poll was taken. What is 90% of Virginians want right to work to stay? 90%? Yeah. Who is for 90% of anything?
Yeah. Well, Virginia Free did a poll. They're a very important group in Virginia supporting small businesses in the state. They did their poll, and I think it came out to 86 or 87%. We do polls continually. We get over 80% support for right to work, and the idea is that you shouldn't be compelled to pay dues or fees to a union to get or keep a job. And the interesting part about that, John, is union households are in the 70s as well. They get the story too. You know, look, I shouldn't be forced to pay for things I disagree with, and I should be able to hold union officials accountable. And that's the one way you do it, is by saying, I don't like your political agenda. I don't like your stands outside of the workplace. I'm not going to pay you anymore. That tends to clarify the relationship between a union official and a worker when they can withhold their money, and they can do it because of the behavior of that union official. It just makes perfect sense.
And it's not only politics. You might not like the job they're doing in helping your particular craft, right? You just might not like the union leadership. You might not like what they negotiated. There's a number of things, but if it's compensatory, if they're just taken, if it's automatic to come out of your check, and if you don't want to do that, you have to leave the union and quit your job, then basically you have no say. You're right. It gives the union leaders, perpetual power with no consequence for performance, no accountability.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting. The one thing the Democratic Party always talks about, well, we're for the working man. And the first thing they do when they get elected is to go and try to force those working men and women to pay union dues or fees in order to keep a job. It happened in Michigan. We passed a right to work law. It was in place for 10 years. Workers basically still joined unions, supported the union. Michigan's economy began to turn around. Manufacturing jobs came back. The automobile industry started to recover. And the first thing, when the Democrats took a one-seat majority in the House and a one-seat majority in the Senate, with Gretchen Whitmer being reelected to the governorship, one of the first bills, actually I think it might have been the first or second bill they introduced in the legislature on the very first day, was to repeal the right to work law and force workers in Michigan to pay union dues or fees in order to keep their jobs. It's outrageous. There's lots of other things we could do, and one of the things government could certainly do is get out of the way instead of trying to regulate the economy and telling small business people what they can and cannot do. That's really another problem. But right to work is part and parcel of that because of the funding mechanism that provides union officials to elect people that will expand their power when they get into office. And that's what Abigail Spanberger is trying to wait for post-election day to admit where she really stands, John. But you pointed it out, her record is pretty clear, and so is Winsome Sears.
I mean, Mark, she's a total fraud. I just got to be honest. Spanberger is such a fraud. She's such a phony, and she never answers a question. I mean, it is really the most ridiculous stealth campaign. It's worse than Biden in her basement. I mean, she refuses to answer any question. She will not come clean on right to work. We all know how she stands because she already voted against it. She's amazing. And, the thing is that we're chatting here with Mark Mix. Mark is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. Glenn Youngkin has been a big supporter of right to work. And he told me when I met with him, and Ann and I met with him a couple weeks ago at the mansion, he said right to work is the number one reason that we have such a positive business and new business climate in Virginia. He says, when I go on to meet with businesses, the first thing I tell them is we're a right to work state. So that, hey, if you're going to have a union, then people have the choice in order to join that. How important is keeping right to work in Virginia to get new job opportunities in?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, John, when you talk to site selection experts, those people that consult with businesses, so John Frederick, who's expanding his empire all the time, says, hey, I want to expand to a new state. You call someone, maybe you do your own investigation, but let's hypothetically say you call someone, and what they'll say is, and you'll say to them, I want a right to work state. We know that almost between 50 and 75% of people looking to expand or relocate will only choose states with right to work laws. And you see the evidence is pretty clear. Florida, Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Idaho, Arizona, Wyoming, those states that are increasing manufacturing jobs, increasing job opportunities, and increasing opportunities for kids to stay in the state and get a job where they grew up. Those are important things. And I think Governor Youngkin's talked about that before, is making opportunities for families to stay closer together instead of having to travel 1,000 miles to get a decent job. Those jobs are now residing in right to work states. And the evidence is demonstrable now, John. The unions would try to argue the economics of it. They just can't do it anymore. The only thing they've got is compulsion and force, and that's their primary business proposition, and it's a failing one. We know that. After 4 years of Joe Biden, union density actually diminished. Even though he said he was going to be the most pro-union president in American history, the numbers in the union density actually diminished over that 4-year period.
Why is that? Why have they diminished?
Well, because union officials, the only thing they got to sell is force and coercion. And they were supporting political candidates that were standing up for things that Joe Biden was standing up for. And they're standing up for things that Abigail Spanberger is standing for, like the school districts and the parental control of the school districts. And that's not my issue. But as a parent of 6 kids, I'm concerned about how these great minds in Richmond or the great minds in Washington, D.C. are going to tell me how I can raise my kids and what people in the government school system can do to my kids without my knowledge. Spanberger won't answer those questions either, John.
Well, she won't answer them because she's on the wrong side of every issue. The wrong side. This is why she didn't want to debate with some Earl Seals either. I think they've got one debate at an HBCU college in Norfolk State. It's probably like an hour. I hope it's an hour and a half, but it's like one debate. She doesn't want to answer a question because she's on the wrong side, Mark, of every issue. Right to work being one of the key ones. I mean, how many jobs are we going to lose in Virginia if they scrap right to work? Do you guys have a number on that?
Yeah, well, John, it may not be the jobs we lose, it's the opportunities we lose. And I think that's kind of the way to frame it.
Of new jobs coming in.
Yeah, that's right. And, CNBC has ranked Virginia in the top 5, the top number 1 state 3 times in the last, I think, 6 years as being a top state for business. Right to work is one of the key components of that. CNBC actually mentions that. It's a right to work state. And those states are the ones that are creating jobs. Georgia, another state. Tennessee, you're holding your Tennessee Titans Cup. Their football team's not as good as their economic development team, but they're doing great work in Tennessee as well in creating jobs and opportunity for people in Tennessee. So it's not necessarily the jobs lost, it's the opportunities lost. And I know Governor Youngkin would agree with this based on his travels and his conversations with people that are investing money in new jobs and new opportunities, that right to work is a primary mechanism for that attraction. And the rejection of Virginia will grow greater and greater if we don't protect workers from being forced to pay dues or fees to get or keep a job.
It's crazy. I mean, it's insane to mess something up that has been so successful. Yeah. Virginia, as you say, has been the number 1 state 3 out of the last 6, always in the top 5, right to work being one of them. I know you brought my Titans up. I still have my Titans Cup. Worst franchise right now in professional athletics, including the Canadian Football League. Amy, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but it's so bad. They are so bad. They are so bad. You can't even watch them. I mean, It's a sad situation. But you're not here to talk about football, especially the Titans. It was so bad. And baseball season's over. I'm an Astro fan. Soon as we're out, baseball season's over. I don't know who's playing. I don't care. But I want to get back to right to work. Yeah. When I was to work at the Philadelphia Inquirer, you talk about unionization, right? So the salespeople, I was in the sales area there, one of the in the senior management team. So I go in there, right? I think McClatchy owned it. They send me in just help straight out the sales. So the salespeople are in a unionized environment and they're forced to be in it. So it's like, and they had to make commission to pay for the union dues they took out. I mean, the whole thing is screwy. And they were like, why do we have to be in this? They don't do anything for us. And it's like, well, because it is what it is. You're in Pennsylvania, or you're in Philadelphia, wherever the hell we were. I mean, anybody that is forced to pay something they don't want to pay, I mean, it's like it's just stealing money from them. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen in Virginia if this continues.
Yeah, indeed, John. Anything that's voluntary is much stronger than anything that's forced together through compulsion. I mean, Samuel Gompers, the father of the American labor movement, said this in his final speech in El Paso, Texas in 1924. He said, "The workers of America adhere to voluntary institutions. If you try to force, you will destroy that which brought together by people that make the choice to be part of it is inherently stronger than anything forced together." And unions haven't gotten that message. They didn't listen to Samuel Gompers, and the evidence is very clear that a voluntary system of unionization back in those days is much stronger than the one today where it says, John, you've got to pay me in order to work. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you want to talk about. I don't care about anything other than I get your money each month or you don't work. That's the difference. And it's really simple. I mean, federal law protects any worker's right to join in order to try to organize a union. And labor law is trying to balance between workers and employers and the opportunity there. But nothing stops workers in Virginia today, to your point, by holding on to something you already have. And it's very simple. Nothing stops a worker from joining a union today in Virginia or organizing a worker.
Or starting with, there's laws that protect this. If you want to, if you're in a Starbucks and you want a union, you have the right to organize there. Yep. If you're at a newspaper, you have if you work for the Virginia Pilot, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, you have every right to join a union, start a union, make it voluntary. You have every right to do that, and we encourage that if that's what you choose to do. All we're saying is making it compulsory stealing money from you that you don't want to be involved in it is not the way to go. And businesses choose to come into Virginia and hire people and create jobs because we're a right-to-work state. That means right to work. And you know what right to work means? It means you have a right to work without paying somebody to get or keep your job. That's what it means, right, Mark? That's it.
Exactly, John. You kind of wonder, I wish it was more complicated so I could sound more intelligent about it, but it's not. It is literally as simple as you just articulated. So thanks for that.
I love simplicity. Mark, thank you for being us. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, and I want to thank him for being with us today. And although he's not commenting here politically, if you're one of the 80% in Virginia that want to keep a right to work state, then you got to vote for Winsome Earl Sears for governor, because if you vote for Spanberger, she's getting rid of it. It is as simple. Speaking of simplicity, Mark, it's as simple as that. My narrative, not Mark's. Mark, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, John. Always a privilege to be on with you. Appreciate it.